Do you fear rejection and abandonment? Do you feel unworthy of love? Do you repeat the same toxic relationship patterns? The thing is, our childhood has a significant impact on what we do in our adult life, and it's only on understanding our upbringing can we really understand and navigate and change how we live. My name is Angela Keary. I'm a feminine empowerment coach. I specialise in healing after narcissistic abuse, and I also offer twin flame and spiritual guidance. This is the thing, we don't register the fact that our childhood can actually have a big impact on what we do on our everyday life. And like say, right, we all have a wounded inner child within us, no matter what kind of upbringing you had. Even if your parents were present or, you know, you felt like you had a loving upbringing, there can be still things that can cause your inner child to feel wounded to this day. Simple things of being reprimanded for crying, told to be quiet, drawn on the wall and then getting given out to for it. This can lead to lasting effect. The simple thing of falling in the schoolyard and the kids laughing at you, this can lead to trauma within your inner child. But oftentimes we carry a fear of abandonment and rejection. During childhood, we're dependent on our parents or caregivers for feeling that love, for feeling that security, that safety. And if that safety isn't met, it can carry on with us into our adulthood. A parent doesn't have to physically leave for you to feel abandoned. A parent can be incapable of showing you affection, could have substance abuse issues, could just be not capable of giving you the love and attention that you need. These are all ways that we can actually be triggered into feeling that abandonment or that rejection. And if we didn't get that love growing up, or that, what we needed growing up, we can go into adult life with a fear of rejection and a fear of abandonment. This can lead us to attracting unhealthy relationships. For me personally, I did not connect the dots. I suffered from anxiety and depression in my teenage years up until my 30s. But I never pinpointed I have anxiety and depression because my mother left when I was 2. Never connected the dots. It was only into in my early 30s when I discovered inner child healing that I was like, hold on now a second. This makes sense. I realized that on an unconscious level, my inner child was still within me in agony. She solely blamed herself for my mother leaving. I did not acknowledge this. I spent my teenage years laughing. Not laughing. Well, yeah, I was laughing that I didn't have a mother because I didn't know what it was like. So I didn't really, I kept saying to myself, if I don't know what it's like to have a mother, how can I miss having a mother? So therefore I kind of remained in this kind of a numb state. And I used to just laugh about it, joke about it, didn't give a shit. So I never registered with the fact that not having my mother growing up had a massive impact on what I was feeling. This is why I suffered from anxiety and depression. This is why I had a fear of rejection and abandonment. This is why I felt so unworthy of love. My inner child believed that my mother didn't love me. My inner child believed that I wasn't worthy of unconditional love. I felt I'd done something wrong. I was the reason that she left. I did not register this until my early 30s. I literally was in this I suppose my trauma bubble, as I spoke about yesterday. I was in this trauma bubble, didn't give a shit. I was like, I'm fine, everything's fine. And then I realized how much of an impact my inner child was still feeling because of my mother leaving. And this is the thing. You're not going to be conscious of it. And we don't connect the dots. We're not going around every day thinking, oh, my inner child, this, that, there. Unless you're conscious of inner child healing, you're not going to connect the dots. And you're going to think, I've seen this so many times before. People have said, I didn't suffer trauma as a child. Then they explain some of what they went through and you're like, yes, you fucking did. That's fucking trauma. That's abuse. And they're like, yeah, well, people have suffered worse than I have. It doesn't fucking matter. You're not here to compare your notes and say, oh, I was abused more than you were. No, it's not like that. If you went through any kind of trepidation or any kind of abuse, neglect, or, distance from your parents as a kid or physical abandonment, you're gonna, it's going to leave a lasting impact. You're going to get, you might say, there's another one, if kids of divorced parents have the same thing. And this is what it is. Like, my mother left. I was left with one parent. But this is, it doesn't matter what age your parents separate. There's still going to be wounding. You know, even if you're an adult and your parents separate, you're still kind of going to go, was this my fault? For some reason, a child is so... we believe it's our fault. We believe the world revolves around us. So as a child, if anything goes wrong, we're literally there, sitting there going, I fucked up. I did everything wrong. Because we just don't know any different. And, you know, obviously we're not conscious of this. And then later in life, we carry all this on. So we're carrying that wounding. And I realized, I didn't even know this, okay? I was attracting narcissistic relationship after narcissistic relationship. Didn't join the dots. Didn't know what narcissism was. Went through an 8-year toxic relationship. Then I went through another one that was over a year and a half. And I started doing research and I started to realize that my exes were narcissistic. So I kind of had a concept of what narcissism was. And I realized my boss in work was also a narcissist. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to leave this job because he was starting to push people out. So I was like, I'm going to be next, so I better get a job. That was grand. So I decided to start dating again. And guess what? I attracted another narcissist. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is so familiar. I was actually doing the research. I was like, my boss is an narc. This new guy is a narc. What the fuck is going on? And I was like, I thought I'd healed. Why am I still attracting narcissists? Or, you know, this is at the time I started to discover patterns. Repeated patterns. We repeat cycles over and over again till we learn the lesson. So I repeated these fucking cycles till I was in my early 30s. And it was only when I started to learn about repeated cycles that I was like, it's not a coincidence. There's no such thing as coincidences. It's all synchronicity. And it's like, it's not a coincidence that my boss is an narc and this guy is an narc and my ex was an narc. And then I started to go, okay, maybe it's me. Maybe there's something with me that I need to change. And that's when I discovered inner child healing. My inner child felt so unworthy of love, so undeserving of love, that I attracted the narcissistic relationships and I latched onto them. I was very naive. I was very vulnerable. I was very needy. I was very seeking outside myself validation. And the narc is very good at telling you that, you know, the love that you think you need. So this is why I kept repeating those patterns. And it's only within healing my inner child that I started to understand this. I looked back on my life and I was like, oh my God, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. I rebelled as a teenager. You know, I drank a lot. I took drugs, all this kind of stuff. And I look back and I'm like, you know, I was very hard on myself for these things. I was like very shameful and regretful over my teenage years or some of the things I'd done in the past. And I looked back and I was like, not only were you abandoned as a child, you had to go into womanhood with no mother and 2 men in the house. This isn't normal. This isn't going to be normal for your nervous system. My feeling of unsafety was huge. I went through my whole life in my masculine energy, so scared of everything. And I didn't even realize this until I started to become conscious of it. This is the thing. The impact our childhood and our teenagehood has on our adulthood is profound. And it's only in sitting with it that you can actually see and join the dots. You can actually say to yourself, wow, that came from a place of woundedness. And this is the thing. It's only when you become aware that you can look back and say, that makes sense. I made that decision based on a level of wounding, a huge level of wounding. And this is it. And as I said, it doesn't have to be a massively traumatic childhood. There are just going to be certain concepts. Like your parents could be strict, they could be religious. You might have had your both parents there, but they could have been arguing, they could have been substance abuse. All this kind of stuff can lead to childhood trauma. And we don't understand it until later in life. Then we end up attracting toxic relationships and all these wounds are triggered again. And, I ended up attracting narcissistic relationships romantically. The bosses I mentioned, there was more than one. Also my friends. And some family members turned narcissistic as well. And I'm like, oh my God, am I creating this? Is it all my fault? But it wasn't. It was just that I was in such a vulnerable, wounded place that I felt so unworthy that I was attracting what I felt I deserved. Or as well as that, because of we grew up as sponges. Our environment is what shapes us. So what did you grow up with? And for me personally, obviously I grew up without a mother, but I also grew up seeing a model of love that was fucking toxic. It was violent and it was abusive. So I went into adult life believing that love was toxic and abusive. And I attracted the very same thing. So ask yourself that question as well, because a lot of the times when we're wounded, we end up actually seeking out somebody who's actually like our parent, our our wounded parent. So I ended up with an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. I ended up with an alcoholic. You know what I mean? And I ended up drinking an awful lot myself. You end up kind of with somebody who's controlling or narcissistic or similar to the model of love you saw growing up. There was verbal abuse in one of my relationships. There was physical abuse in another one. You know what I mean? So I literally manifested relationships that looked like what I witnessed growing up. This is what we do. Our childhood shapes us. Our environment shapes us. So even as an adult, if you're surrounded by a certain thing for long enough, you're going to adopt that thing. If you're in a circle of people who are toxic, you're probably going to fucking end up toxic. And this is it. We end up attracting, or we end up absorbing everything in our environment. But when we're very young, when we're infants, we are sponges. Actual sponges. We're born unconditionally loving. We're born knowing all we know is love. But if our parents or caregivers cannot give us the validation and the security that we need at that young age, we're going to live our lives feeling unsafe and insecure and unworthy. And every decision we ever make is going to be based on that. And it's not just relationships, simple things of going to college, going for this career, reaching for the stars effectively. It doesn't come into your mindset because you're stuck in this mentality of your parents. You adopt their belief system. You adopt their own, I suppose, what they went through as well. And this is the thing. We're here to break the cycles. This is the most important thing. Generations upon generations previous to us have suffered like we did, or maybe even worse. But they repeated the pattern. They kept it going. And our job here is to literally break this fucking cycle, break the generational cycle, break the generational curse. We're here to change things for the future of humanity, but for ourselves as well. And it's the most beautiful thing to discover your inner child. Because I know a lot of us are afraid to face what's within. We're afraid to go back to that childhood. We're afraid to remember those things. But this shit is buried within you and it's fucking you up. It's fucking you up and it's fucking your life up. You know what I mean? You're literally going to continue repeating patterns in toxic environments. Same shit, different day energy. You keep going to end up with the struggles and pains you always did. You're still going to end up feeling unworthy. You're going to end up codependent on other people for feeling that validation. You're never going to find that love within yourself unless you address the fact that you have an inner child within you. And how do we do this? This is so important. You know what I mean? The way I see it, right? We have a child standing in front of us looking for love. So picture yourself as your 2-year-old self. For me, I always go back to my 2-year-old self. And, go back to a time of your childhood, one that has severe pain. And, don't be afraid of it. Because at the end of the day, you're an adult right now. But your inner child is still a child. Now, you have to remove the fact that, there's a child standing in front of you crying out for love, crying out to be loved, to have a parent, crying out for that validation. So you have to remove yourself. Like, we're all like this. Oh, as adults, we're like, oh, woe me, poor me, poor me. Yeah, okay, I know we suffered. But there's a fucking child right here and right now suffering. And we're choosing, I don't want to feel pain. But you're literally leaving a child feel that pain. And I know that's it's a symbolism in a sense, but it's real. And it's the same for your future children. Can you look back on a time when you suffered as a child? You didn't deserve that. It wasn't your fault. Could you imagine another child going through that? It's your job now to prevent that happening to your inner child and to your future children. You have to nurture that child. See that child as your own now and reparent it and love it the way it always deserved to be loved. This is the thing. In loving, reparenting and validating your inner child, making your inner child feel safe, you will in turn start to love yourself. I couldn't even like myself. I was in such toxic relationships because of the shame I felt from the past. There was a time in my life that I couldn't even look in the mirror. I just couldn't look in the mirror. I didn't like what I saw. And I remember my friend saying to me back in 2018, it was like, look in the mirror, tell yourself that you're amazing, that you love yourself. And I was like, I can't. I looked in the mirror and I just started crying. I was like, I can't, that's a lie. But when I started working on myself and started working on my inner child, I can safely say I do love myself now. And I'm happy with the person I am. I'm no longer in shame or embarrassed about my past because what I did was based on a wounded inner child. You know what I mean? We were so hard on ourselves for the mistakes we make, or the choices we make, or the decisions we make. Why did I get in that relationship? You got in that relationship because you were in fucking pain. That's why. You rebelled as a teenager because you were fucking wounded. Not because we're so fucking hard on ourselves for all the decisions we made. And it's like when you look back and see that your toxic childhood led to your rebelliousness, led to you doing the things that you did, you can actually say, okay, hold on. And for me personally, I was so hard on myself. And now I look back on my teenage years and go, it could have been a lot worse. It really could have. Like, my trauma reflects into more rebellion in a sense. Like, as far as I'm concerned, if I did worse, I could forgive myself for that because my childhood trauma was enough to, I won't say condone, what's the word? To explain why I did the things that I did. So it's like we only really can discover how to navigate our lives properly when we become aware of ourselves and our inner child. Self-awareness is key. Listen to your thoughts, listen to your feelings, listen to your triggers. You might be triggered on a daily basis. You might get angry at certain things, or you might get frustrated with certain things, but it's within you. It's the anger didn't manifest out of anywhere. You've got an inner child within you that is so scared and so angry with the world that's where our anger stems from. So it's reparenting yourself, loving yourself, nurturing yourself. And I promise you, when you start to just realize how much of an impact your childhood did have on your life, you can start to change it. And going forward, you start to make decisions that are healthy. You no longer attract narcissistic relationships. You attract healthy, loving relationships and friendships into your life. And that's the most important thing. You evolve into the person you were always meant to be, or who you always were. But your conditioning or your trauma led you to feel differently. So you really end up discovering the most amazing parts of yourself when you I suppose rediscover your inner child. So trust this process. I know it might be hard to face our trauma, but if we face it, we get to release it. So thank you so much for listening today, and I really hope this resonates. If it does, please like and share, and please subscribe to my channel so I can reach as many people as possible. And if you'd like help on your journey, please book me for a free discovery call today, and love nothing more than taking a path. I also have another channel called Aligning with Angie, where I share a guided meditation every week. The information for that is in the description box.